I'd heard a few of them screaming before the game, we've got to do it for Wally. Came up again during the game, got to do it for Wally. And I said, just do it for yourselves. And, here I go. Got to play Union on Saturdays and League on Sundays. That was a wonderful tour. Japan, France, England, Ireland, Wales, Scotland and Holland. Undefeated.
What are you, 16 or something at this time?
I was 17.
It's a fair trip, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Especially the one to Holland.
It's no use coming 2 years of football and losing 2 years grand finals.
You're a handsome man with good hair. It must be said too, Holly.
Ran onto the field and the first thing that I did was flick the hair out of the eye. Most of the Sydney people wanted the end of interstate football. They said it's a pain in the arse.
The first blue in State of Origin footy.
And how did it start? Bang.
Bang.
Hot-headed young man. Arthur actually hit his best mate.
State versus state, mate versus mate.
Exactly right. All the media said to him, why did you do that? And he said, because I was on the opposition.
And what does this mean to you as Queensland players in this inaugural State of Origin?
Interstate football was born again. To get the opportunity to play for Queensland was great, but the thrill was made so much greater because at 20 years of age, I was playing along some of the superstars.
You got goosebumps?
Goosebumps.
So do I, mate.
All over. How many times would you say you've been concussed? And I said, I really don't know. What, are you looking for an average? How many times a year? And he went...
Well, we've been privileged to have some wonderful guests over the 9-year history of this show, but walking from the hotel in Brisbane this morning to the studio, I must admit there was a little bit of trepidation because this man... Well, he's a Rugby League Immortal. He's done it all in the game. I've never met him before, but he's come in here with a big smile on his face. Wally Lewis, I can't tell you how much a privilege it is to have you on the Howie Games. Nice to see you. How you going?
Thanks, Howie. Yeah, good, mate. Good. Enjoying having the opportunity to get on air. Always enjoy it. Talking about footy, best friends, and the people I love watching on TV.
There's so much we need to get through. I have never watched so much old State of Origin footage on the plane yesterday and last night. And I want to talk a lot to you about State of Origin because you were there from the inception and I didn't really understand how it all started. But as we were just getting set up here, you said you watch every game of footy, NRL, every weekend.
Every weekend,
So tell me about that. Why do you do that?
Love watching... the champions playing and love watching the champions of tomorrow taking place, watching the thrills, the skills that they present every week. And I think it's also, we have a thing up here in Brisbane, Queensland, that we like to keep an eye on our State of Origin stars of the future. Yep. Look for the kids that are going to be wearing maroon jerseys in State of Origin in the next couple of years. And I think it's always fantastic to see them in their younger days when they've got that. You can just see they've got it. They're about to present it, but they're still in the learning curve. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity to be able to get alongside those guys, talk to them, and listen to what they have in mind, what they intend to do, and what they're quite capable of doing in the present day.
And in the present day, when you look at it with a remarkably skilled eye, for the next generation, obviously work a lot on AFL, and the game has become a running game where you need to run and run and run probably in the last 15 to 20 years. So the game has changed a lot. A modern NRL player, what are you looking for when you're looking at someone as identifiable talent?
Creativity.
Yeah.
That's something that I can remember speaking to a couple of the legends in the game. Johnny Raper was one of those, and Bob Fulton was another. And he always used to say, when you're carting the ball forward, try and create doubt in the mind of the defender. And I remembered it absolutely perfectly, thinking that's what it's all about. If you're one of the attacking players that are the creative ones, you love to be able to run to them and cause drama in the opposition defensive line. And it's something that I think I got around to enjoying. It didn't always work, but there are the thrills of the current day game where I'm watching these guys go out. The most modern Darren Lockyer was one that created doubt in the mind of the defenders.
Absolutely.
Virtually every time that he did it. Andrew Johns, Joey Johns, he did it, although I didn't enjoy watching him do it for New South Wales against Queensland. But it's a real thrill, and you just see the guys. And we get to talk about it once we've retired. We're sitting back in the chairs, and you probably thank your parents more than anything for giving you the opportunity to play the game and learn virtually every time that you go out onto the field.
We'll get to where you started the game and your connection with the game, which if you could choose to watch one NRL team at the moment, and I'm hoping you give me the right answer here, Wally, who is it?
Melbourne Storm.
There you go, there's the right answer. We're going to get on famously. Why? Why?
I've been a Melbourne Storm fan. I still remember watching them in the second year of their existence. They won a premiership.
Yeah.
There's only been two teams that have come up with a record like that, and that was back in 1908, the first year of or whatever it was in the competition, and the team that did it in the second year. That was remarkable. And to be honest, there weren't a lot of star players in the team. They had Chris Anderson as the coach, and I can remember him saying at the stage, he said, "There's no layers here. They're all playing for their opportunity, that they want to stay here." And to be able to do that in 2 years of footy was quite remarkable. Yes. And I've loved every bit since. Now they've got Craig Bellamy, who's probably one of the chief officers for the blood pressure.
I loved when you show those shots and he's got his veins poking out of his head, and they can be 20 up at the stage.
Yeah, that's it. They can be way in front. But he's a perfectionist. And he had some time under Wayne Bennett, playing with Wayne Bennett as coach at Canberra, I believe, and Tim Sheens. He had plenty of time with Tim. But just to watch how he turns things around, and he hates losing, but he loves to see his team absolutely perfect. They can win by 30 or 40, and a player will drop the ball with the line wide open, and he'll blow up. And I can understand that if you're out to be absolutely perfect about your game and become a team that no one can underestimate, you've got to be a perfectionist.
I was at the AFL, and I was working with Alistair Lynch, who won 3 premiership here with the Brisbane Lions. And he said, "Oh, when are you coming up?" And I said, "I'm coming up the night before to do a podcast." He said, "Oh, who with?" I said, "Wally Lewis." And he said to me, and I don't wish to embarrass you, he said, "Do you understand the privilege of this?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I understand." He said, "No, I don't think you do understand." And he told a couple of stories about you from when he first came up here and the effect you had on, the population. But when you're walking in here today, Branko, a text like, "Oh, bloody Wally Lewis, you got Wally Lewis coming in." Like on the street now, how do you deal with the fact that, well, it's a pleasant thing to deal with, there is just so much love for you in this country, but especially in this state? And how often do people come up to you? Is it every half hour, say, "Oh, Wally, I saw you do this, I saw you do that, I've got a memory of this, I've got a memory of that"?
Most of the general conversation is very kind. It's fantastic. You just get to say good day. People might ask what you're doing now, how things are. They're very caring people, which is fantastic. I've had some health issues with epilepsy, and in the early days that was fantastic. It took me a long time, and I made sure that I got back to everyone that working up at Channel 9. I had letters sent to me, and I made sure that I returned every one of those. It took me quite some time.
A handwritten letter?
Yeah. I used to, if I couldn't get them on the phone, I'd write a letter. And most of it, the general conversation, was done on the telephone, which I find to be far more comfortable.
So you'd ring people up that had sent you a message?
Yep.
And what was
most of the time they'd have their address on the back for return letters, and I'd look it up on the phone book. There wouldn't be a telephone number with it, and most of the time I managed to get it. Sometimes they didn't. They just put their name on, and that was it. So it was a bit hard to get back. But
how was the reaction when you said, "Oh, knackers, it's Wally Lewis"?
Well, most of the time it was really good. A couple of times, "Oh, mate, Jono, that, mate, you're not sucking me in. Get out. You're a D-head, and they'd go on and on. I'd say, "Mate, it really is." And, "Oh, bull, you know what?" And they don't. I said, "Well, mate, do me a favour. Ring me here at Channel 9. This is the number you can ring. No, you've pulled a name and a number out of the book. No, won't do that. And the vast majority of times they got back and they said, "Oh, sorry, mate." And I said, "You don't owe me an apology." I said it was good to hear that, the humour attached to it. So, but the one thing that I used to say to them, I'm no different to anyone else, but my job was in footy. They might have been teachers, lawyers, doctors, whatever. Guys that everyday life that they were happy with it, and I'm no better because I was playing footy.
I have made copious notes, which I said to you, which I don't typically do, and I want to play some clips because I'll be honest, Wally, we've never met before, and it's been publicised that CTE is something that, well, I don't know how you view it and where you're at with it, but I didn't want to put you in a position where I was asking you stuff that maybe you didn't recall. But then
only too happy, mate.
But then you've rolled off a couple of stats. You've gone back to 1908. So if you don't mind me asking, to you, what is CTE and what effect, if any, does it have on you?
Dealing with chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
Right.
That's the thing that, and I said exactly the same thing when I spoke to the doc. I said, I'm just having some real issues with my memory.
Okay. How long ago was this?
The first issues were probably 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
The ones where I got to speak to the doctor would have been a bit over 2 years. And it was the fear factor, I think. I didn't want to be seen as a guy that wasn't quite the full quid.
Okay.
And I had the opportunity to be able to deal with it with my personal doctor, who basically said, mate, this is it. He said, but I'm just a GP. I'll put you on to. So I got the opportunity to head south, speak to some doctors here in Brisbane first, and then head south and went to Sydney. And it was a bit embarrassing, I think, for the moment.
What were you embarrassed about?
The doctor basically just said, what are the issues that you're dealing with? And I said, mate, I can't remember things.
Okay.
I really can't remember things. And I had a short sleeve shirt on, and I remember he looked at me and he said, take a look at your arms. I had the goosebumps all over him. He said, don't be embarrassed. He said, you've come here to get assistance. Don't be embarrassed about asking for it. So that's pretty much gone on ever since getting the doctor's prediction for the future, and it was all about doing things in a way that you're going to feel quite comfortable to go on with progress as your number one priority. So I've done that. The great thing has been the amount of people that I've spoken to. A lot of the footy guys have come and they said, when you said you've got this CTE, does this happen? I go, yep. Does this happen? Yep. This one? Yep. This one? Well, no, I don't know much about that. Or another one. I'll say we all could be a little bit different. I said, but have you spoken to a doctor yet? No, but I really don't want to go. I don't want to be known as the bloke that's not the full quid.
Right.
And I'll say, well, you're kind of seeking answers for me. I can't give you the answers. I can get 3 or 4 of them out of 10, I guess. But the assistance that you're going to get, the best assistance, is only going to come from the medical staff. And I think it's been pretty good since. I've moved on. The time in Sydney I had dealing with the doctor the first time, I could feel my face go red the first couple of times, and I thought, you idiot, stop worrying about the embarrassment. You've come here for help. Don't think that now it's going to cause some real distress in your life. And the advice that I was given, and I think I've kind of felt pretty comfortable too, the guys that I've spoken to from footy, and it's not just rugby league, there have been rugby union guys involved in it, and one or two AFL guys that sort of say, well, it's pretty rife out there at the moment, isn't it? And you just want to be able to help somebody, but at the same time, I'd be a liar if I said that I'm not looking for support as well or advice on what the future should include. So
what do you do from that diagnosis? I spoke to a chap called Owen Wright on this show, who's a surfer from the coast, and had a very serious concussion where he couldn't basically operate for a year. And he did a tremendous amount of research and plugging his brain into, these are ignorant statements, Wally, but into electrodes and all sorts to stimulate stuff. Is there anything that you do now as a result of your diagnosis to slow a situation? Like, these are ignorant questions, so I excuse the ignorance of the questions, but what do you do to...
Stay in constant contact with the doctor. Ask him, is there anything that I should be doing? And they're up front. They'll say, I can't give you a couple of tablets and things are going to go away for you. That's not the way. There is no cure.
Right.
And I think when he delivered that sentence to me, it was a slap in the face.
Yep.
And I swallowed pretty hard. But by the same token, I think it was... I was being a realist in not expecting marvellous things to happen and just to be able to deal with it. And the knowledge I think that I had was when it became public, the guys that put their hand up and wanted to talk about it, I felt very comfortable with that, because there were plenty of other guys from all codes dealing with it in the same way, with the full knowledge that there is no cure. We've just got to be able to get on with everyday life, and it's probably not the answer that I was expecting or hoping from the doc. I thought that there must be some sort of thing, but there are, and I've seen a couple of guys that are in a horrendous state, absolutely horrendous state, and they are from rugby league. And I don't mean to upset any mums out there that are now saying, well, my son's not going to play rugby league. But the full knowledge of there is a pretty handy support group that are helping each other through the times.
So how, these are personal questions, so answer them as you will. How does it, or does it manifest itself in you in day-to-day? Like you talking about this, obviously you're very happy to, because of the benefits it can have to the community, but how does it manifest in day-to-day life? I
think I described it to the doc, and I've mentioned it to a couple of the guys that I work with every day. Gene Miles is, I'm very close to Gene, a former player, and now there are times throughout the day where I'll ask him that question, and he'll just put the hand up. That's twice, 3 times, and
okay.
But my partner Linda, she's been fantastic through it and has been very patient. But the amount of times where I've seen this expression on her face, and same with Jean, seen the expression on their faces, and I know that I've obviously said something or said it wrong, and I said to her, have I already said that? And she, it doesn't matter, don't worry about it. How many times have I said it? And she'll go, and I'm putting my fingers up here 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and the embarrassment of being repetitive is not something that I'm looking for, but to be honest, I'm kind of past that now.
Okay.
I don't worry about the embarrassment. I apologise and just say I get on with life, but it's a question that most of the guys that are seeking answers will put to me.
I don't know if you could answer this. Would you have any idea of how many times, and it's a different time, and it's viewed differently, but how many times concussed? Yeah.
When I got asked by the doctor the first time, my answer to him immediately was, what, are you looking for an average, how many times a year? And he went, what?
Okay.
And I said, is that what you're after, an average of how many times? And he said, how many times would you say you've been concussed? And I said, well, I said that. And he said, in total? And I said, I really don't know, but it probably used to happen 5 or 6 times every year. I said, if you're looking for a total, I don't know, 50, 60? And he sat back in his chair and he said, would it be similar for all of the... I said, probably. Okay. It probably would. You got the big boys up front. They're putting their heads in it a little bit more. I said, but the one time that I said it was the sort of how serious the concussions were, and I said, I've put it in a book a while ago. I said, but I remember a couple of times when I was sort of in the peak of my career, where I was about 25, 26, and I remember going into a tackle. I got up, fell over, couldn't make it. The doctor came out onto the field and walked me off. And there were no concussions once you got replaced in the early days before the rule change. that was it. You were off for the game. And the doctor, Dr. Tom Dooley, I went to see him the next day, and he said, "Mate, do you remember what happened when I walked you from the field?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I was concussed." And he said, "No, what happened next when I was walking you from the field?" And I said, you walked me along, and then I watched the replay and you pushed me to the ground." And he said, "Yeah, do you remember what happened?"
So you're reflecting off the replay you've seen.
Yeah, and I said, no. He said, "You were pissing your pants." We had these white shorts on, and he said, "I could see the urine."
Jeez.
And he said, and I pushed you to the ground because there was a camera coming up, as they always do when you're being replaced. And I said, "I don't remember that at all. I don't." And he sort of just nodded and said, "Well, let's keep that as a record." That was probably the early days for me. I was in my early 20s, but concussions were to become part of a game for all sports.
So you mentioned you didn't want to upset the mums earlier on. So this is the obvious question. It's a $64 million question. This game that you obviously still love, you said you're still watching every game, and has afforded you so much in your life, which we're about to talk about. How do you reflect on the game and the position it's now put you in?
A lot of people will say the numbers for people playing rugby league has diminished, and they certainly have dropped down a little bit. There are schools that don't play footy anymore, whether that's because they don't have a teacher that's been trained in rugby league skills, but certainly the mothers. Nice way of saying this. I think mums have a little bit more control in everyday family life than they did 30 or 40 years ago.
Yep.
And if they don't want their child to play sport, where concussion is an everyday possibility, they won't play. I think back in the old days, if my mum had said he's not going to play, my dad would have said, "June, you have no say in this family. Yep. I'll look after the sports. You look after their schoolwork and iron their shirts nicely."
Yep.
But it's 50-50 now, and certainly that's not going to be the case. And I think for parents to have that fear in their mind that something will happen through playing contact sports will guarantee that the numbers continue to drop.
I'm helping out coach my son's under 14 AFL team, and we've been talking about this because not just, I think, like mums now, obviously I work in the industry, I'm very cognizant of what is going on. I think it's fathers as well who like you look at and think, okay, well, the days of, mate, get your head over the ball and get in, come on, you got to have a real crack, don't be a wuss. Yeah. It's very different now because especially when you're seeing your own children out there and you're seeing some of their mates potentially get concussed at age 13 or 14 and the protocols that are in place, but you do ask yourself questions. Yeah,
mate, I've been to games where I've seen kids come off and heard some of the dads saying, he's soft, have a look at that bloke, he's coming off already. And you sort of grit your teeth and you think, you idiot. Okay, I suppose you were one of the champions of the game that were one of the tougher players of the game, but they weren't blokes that were given a lot of common sense or concern, because I'm damn sure if it happened to their children at that time, their care factor would increase enormously. They'd have the fear that after getting a little bit older, they would continue to have some health issues. And when they are all about some brain damage, that concern will go through the roof. Absolutely.
Gee, it's a can of worms, isn't it? You do some work as well now. I was reading with Dementia Australia. You're involved in that organisation. Why have you tied in with them?
Well, that's basically what it's dealing with. The head knocks. When I first went to meet the people from Dementia Australia, they were talking about thanking me for giving a warning to the players on behalf of them. And I said, look, to be honest, I wasn't working for you. I was trying to help the players out.
Yep.
I think we all stick together and we've all got cares and concerns for these guys, with the hope that that they're not going to be dealing with this in 10 or 15 years' time. There have been a couple of guys in the rugby league game who are in absolutely appalling condition. They really are. They're the older guys that played back in the days when it wasn't the score on the scoreboard that was the big advertising feature for the day. It was how many blokes got carried off. Oh, it was a tough game. Oh, have a look at that. Boy, these blokes certainly are, they don't play for the win, the 2 points for a win, do they? They play to be able to dictate terms to the opposition. And that's the way that it was. And I'm very happy now that the guys that are in charge of the NRL certainly take extreme interest in the health and safety of the players.
So, last question on this, Wally. Courage comes in many different ways. Talking about it is courageous. Obviously, the way you played rugby league was courageous. Do you have fear about what is coming down the pike for you? After
seeing a couple of the older guys, yes, I do. I'm very hopeful and I'm very determined that I'm going to enjoy the rest of my life.
Yep.
But I have seen a couple of the older guys that they're not enjoying life too much at all. There's quite a few of them that are spending their everyday life in nursing homes. And I don't want to be in a nursing home in the years that come. And I've been out to visit a few, one here in Brisbane, and I won't bring his name up. I think the hardest part was watching his wife throughout the course of my visit. All she did was help him. She'd lift his head forward, be able to pour a glass of water so that he got to be able to drink it. And if life ahead is very similar to that, I don't think there'll be too many guys that ignore it from here on. They will treat it very, very seriously.
Let's hope so. Branko, who's our techie, said, ask Wally if he doesn't mind, because he'd spent some time with you a couple of years ago. I think you were in here, and he said he's got this amazing notebook, and you've brought your notebook in here and he said, he's got all sorts of numbers, and so this is to keep you in contact with what you're doing day to day.
Yeah. I do have some issues about being known as one of the blokes that's not the full quid, but a lot of the things I do with. As we're talking about the notebook that I have, that I don't forget to do it. I love doing the guest speaking engagements, going around to the sports clubs, not just footy clubs, but sports clubs in general, and they've all got the the stories. They say, "I've heard you tell the Kerry Packer one before. Tell that one again, what it was all about." And you'll tell it, and the bloke will say, "I've heard you say that 9 or 10 times now." And I said, "You still want to hear it?" And he said, "Oh yeah, mate, yep. That's the bloke he was, wasn't he?" And I said, "Yeah, he was. He was one of the real backbones for rugby league." So stories like that, I think, always ease a lot of the tension, particularly at the functions that I'm doing at the moment. There may be some concern for the head knocks, but there is still a fair few people that prefer to hear the enjoyable parts to a conversation, rather than have the fear about what might happen to them when they continue their careers.
So the obvious question is, do you want to tell me about Kerry Packer? I'd love to hear about Kerry Packer.
Okay, well, in those days, playing football in Brisbane was wonderful, but we did not get payment anywhere near what it was in Sydney. It was probably 2 or 3 times higher. But also, if you wanted to play for Queensland in those days, in the interstate games, you had to sign a stat deck saying that I promised to stay in Queensland for the next 2 years to follow. And the lawyers used to say, that's illegal. That is straight illegal. You can't go on with that. And the QRL used to say, Ron McAuliffe used to say, well, it's probably not, but it's going to take us 18 months, maybe 2 years to get the court case ready, right, of which you won't be able to play.
Right.
The players were really angry about that, and it was a situation where we were probably making $6,000-7,000 in the early years.
In the Brisbane Rugby League?
In the Brisbane Rugby League competition. I got it up to $13,000, and I thought, that's something that I'm going to be pretty happy with at the moment. And I thought if I can go to Winner Manly, that's something different. I went to the Winner Manly club and unfortunately they went broke. They couldn't pay the players. Gene Miles and myself said, we've got to look around. We were informed by the Queensland Rugby League that there was somebody that wanted to discuss the opportunity of us going and playing in Sydney, and we asked, who was that? And they said, we can't tell you. Can't tell you who it is. If you can just come in here and we'll start the conversation. I said, okay. So we went in and had a discussion with the Queensland Rugby League. How much are you going to pay us? They said, well, we'll get a payment. We've got to get the one from Sydney first. And I said, oh, look, just get this going. If you can just get the offer from the Sydney club and then you can come back. We can't afford to lose 2 more players, and it's for you and a certain other player, a centre. And I said, it's Gene Miles. It's got to be Gene.
Boys.
Yep. So we were told to meet this person so that the conversation could continue at the Brisbane airport, at the private section, away from the public Qantas and Virgin area. Virgin didn't exist in those days.
It might have been Ansett.
Yeah, it was. And we went out there. So I said to Gina, this is for both of us, you know. He said, oh, look, it's got to be done one at a time. And I said, okay, righto, that's the way we'll do it. So I went out, was involved in a little bit of testing my patience.
So you still don't know who you're meeting?
Around, did not know. And I said, so where are they just going to drive up here? And this private plane pulled in and made a taxi its way over. And there was only a few people in the private plane section. It's nowhere near the public airport. So we were waiting to decide. And this guy walked over and he said, Mr. Lewis, Mr. Miles. I was waiting with Gene Miles and we went, yes? Oh, g'day, mate. How you going? How's things? You know, and he said, I'm here to fly you to Sydney. I said, what? I looked at Gene and he said, going to Sydney? He said, well, yes, so I've been told. And I said, who's flying us to Sydney? He said, sir, I've got no idea. He said, I'm a pilot. I've been told to pick up 2 people in a private plane. We got on the plane and the conversation started. Oh, jeez, have a look at this plane. If they can afford this, they've got a few bucks in the bank, got to bump it up a bit. How much are we going to ask for? What are you going to ask for? And I said, oh, well, they reckon Price and Cronin, the 2 best players in Sydney, they reckon that, you know, that they're on 80 or 90,000. So, you know, we got to ask for a bit. We'll ask for 60, 70 grand, 60.
Yep.
And he said, yeah, okay, yeah. And we took off and flying along. And Gino said, how much we're going to ask for? And I said, we've been through that. And I said, we'll ask for 60 or 70. He said, yeah, but is that you getting 60 or 70 or is that me getting 60 or 70? And I said, it's for both of us. And he said, shake hands. And I said, why? He said, I don't trust you one bit. I said, you're my best mate and you don't trust me. He said, no, not a bit. He said, shake hands. And I shook hands and I said, that's it. And he said, and you're going to stick with it. I said, yep. Landed. We got out. The guys picked us up in the car. And I said, mate, where are we going? He said, sir, what? And I said, what club? He said, sir, I'm just a limousine driver. I've been told to pick up 2 people. I said, I know, a Lewis and a Miles. Yes, yeah, that's name. Driving in, I said, we look like we're heading towards the Harbour Bridge. I said, North Sydney? Really?
So you're trying to figure out which club you're going to end up.
Trying to work out which club, and Gino said, oh, yeah, and it might be east, and we started to head that way, and I thought, oh, no, and all of a sudden we took a big swing into the city. I said, we're going into town. And he said, yep, and I looked up, I went, oh, no, PBL Marketing Limited, Kerry Packer. And Gene Miles said, got to ask for more money now. Got to ask for more money.
Push it up more.
We're going to Kerry Packer. Got to ask for more money now. We pulled into this building. This guy took us up to the top floor where Packer was in his office, and we were waiting outside nervously. All of a sudden, a guy walked in. and described himself, introduced himself. He said, I'm the secretary of the Manly Warringah District Rugby League Football Club Limited. I'd like to welcome you here and the possibility of coming to our club. And I said, right, so, okay. And I've looked at Gene and I just kept saying, if I go like that, same. We get the same money, you know. They reckon Price and Cronin are on 90 grand. We'll ask for 70, 75, something like that. And he said, okay. And he kicked me under the table and he said, is that you getting 70 or 75 or me? I said, both of us. We're best mates. He said, shake hands. I said, you don't trust me? He said, not one bit. Okay, that's the way that it is. And we waited, and the secretary said, Mr. Packer can see you now. And we walked in, and just as we started to walk in, Gino just went like this, same.
Same.
Okay, we got in there, and Packer was in there, had his feet up on the desk, the cigarettes, one after another, and he said, right, you're the two chaps started with the same word, or started, you the two blokes are causing us all the trouble. He said, there's a contract, sign it. And I said, oh, well, Mr. Packer, we can't. He said, why not? And I said, you've got to make us an offer first, and then we go. He said, son, let's get one thing straight. I don't gotta do anything. And I'm swallowing hard, and I've looked at Gino sitting next to me for a little bit of support, and he's looking out the window at Sydney Harbour and how's it looking, and how's things, and I'm kicking him, and I said, well, the way that it works, Mr. Packer, is that we're required to take an offer from you and the club, take that back to the Queensland Rugby League to give them the chance to try and match that offer. If they match that offer, then we are entitled. We have to stay. If they can't match the offer, then we can continue the conversations and perhaps come down here. He said, son, let's get another thing straight. If I make you an offer, those chaps from up there are no chance of ever matching it. And I said, no, I don't suppose they are. And I've looked at Gino for support again, and he's looking out the window of Sydney Harbour and, how things are. And I said, and Doug Daly, the Manly secretary, was standing in the corner of the room, and he just said, Mr. Packer, if you don't mind, different players get different contracts, so could we do this one at a time? And Packer said, yeah, we'll go one at a time. And I looked at Gene, and he was on his way out of the office. He took off, and I thought, oh, no, I'm going to go first. I'm sitting in here with Kerry Packer, Australia's prominent businessman. Oh, no. And he said, son, I don't mean to be rude, but I've got a few things on today. So if we can just get through this as quickly as possible. So how much do you want? And I said, Mr. Packer, you got to make us that offer. He said, I'll say it again. You're in my office. You'll do business my way. How much do you want? And I thought, say, what was I talking about to Gene? He said, would you like some thinking music? Is the question too hard? And I thought, you bastards. I said, no, Mr. Packer, I was just working out a few of the figures. Said, if you want me to come and play for the Manly Warringah District Rugby League Football Club Limited, you're going to have to pay me $150,000 a season. He looked at me and said, how much? And I said, $50,000 a season. He said, you're an arrogant prick, aren't you? And I said, yep. And I said, but I've come to win a premiership with Manly. And I said, and by the way, it's a 3-year deal, not a 2. He said, you are an arrogant prick, aren't you? And I said, yep, but again, we've come to win a premiership, me and Gino. And I thought, oh, Christ, that's right, Gino. I've come in here. We're both saying we're going to stick to it. And he said, okay, you're easy. Get out and get the next bloke in. He signed the contract. I thought, I'm getting that money to stay here. I have never made that much money.
So what was the contract for?
$150,000 a season.
So you were going to go 60 or 70 and the last moment you just doubled.
Yeah, and all of a sudden it was Gino's turn to come in. I got up to walk out and he said, no, wait here. You're not going out there to tell your mate how much you're on. I thought, oh, no.
Oh, no, poor Gino.
My best mate. I've double-crossed him. And as he came in, Packer picked the phone up to talk to his secretary to get one of the facts and figures boys to come in, and he took his eyes off us for just a minute, and I went, and Gene, and what I was doing then, for our listeners, I was mouthing 150 without any sound coming out or couldn't be seen, and Gene went, what are you saying? And oh, you idiot. I went straight out the door, sat down. Doug Daly said, welcome to Manly, son. Manly Warringah District Rugby League Football Club Limited. We'll be very happy. And I said, how do you know that I've agreed to terms? And he said, Mr. Packer always gets his own way. And I said, well, he did on this occasion, yeah, and so did I. And we heard the secretary's desk, the buzzer went, come back in now. And I thought, Gino's been in there, 30 seconds. And here we are talking little figures, about 70 grand, if we could get 70 grand. I thought I'd just double cross my best mate. Oh no. I walked back in, sat down, and I couldn't look at Gene. He was to the side, and I was sort of looking at Packer that way and looking at Doug Daly, and he said, Bob Fulton, got yourself 2 new players. I think you'll be very happy with that. Lewis is on 150, and I thought, oh no, I've just got given up here right in front of Gene. No, and I couldn't look at Gene, and Miles is on 130,000 a season. I've turned straight round to him, and he had the tongue stuck in the corner of the mouth, and that was it. We were then contracted to play for Manly until Doug Daly said, Mr. Packer, there's just one thing we've got to do here. If the rest of the players in the club find out how much these 2 are on, they will revolt. So could we please split that in half and do it where it's half to play for the Manly Warringah District Rugby League Football Club Limited, and the other half is to come for PBL Marketing Limited, your company, and we'll do it that way. And that's the way that we did it. We came home, we thought, we're going to Sydney, you beauty, and we kept it, said to the QRL, we've got to come back in, talk to you guys now, and have a meeting. We did. We went into that meeting, and they said, it was with Ross Livermore, God rest his soul, and he said, we've got to come up with some figures here to match that. And I said, no chance, are you? And he said, I think we can do that. Have a look at this. He said, we'll match that contract for $75,000. And I said, no, it's for 150. Mine, and Gino's a bit less. And he said, no, you split, and we split the contract in half for the Manly Club. And they said, we'll try and help you with employment here. And I said, no. You know what's going on here. They only did that so that the other players wouldn't find out. I said, but we are effectively on 150 and Gino's on 130. And he said, well, I'm sorry, we haven't got to match that. And we were furious, absolutely livid when that came about. And we kind of said, if that's the way that it is. We had to go to play for Wynnum. The next one, we rang Manly and told them we thought maybe Packer will help us out in some way, shape or form. They just said, I see what you were doing. You came down here to get a big contract and then say to them, bump it up again and you're getting lots of money in Brisbane. I said, that's not the way it is. And Bob Fulton said, it's all right, mate. We kind of expected that's the way you were going to do it. And I said, mate, I'm telling you, this is the way that it happened. And he wouldn't believe it. Anyway, it sort of went ahead. We had the contract, and they said we're going to have to list it as $75,000 for your contract here in Queensland, and half of that'll be, the other half you're getting from the Queensland Rugby League. The other half comes from your club money, and unfortunately, Wynnum went broke. They had a number of players, us too, and a whole pile of other players which were on very big contracts, which were far in excess of what the Brisbane Rugby League could be paying. And we didn't get paid for those next 2 seasons. And
At all?
At all.
And didn't ever get...
Got money from the Queensland Rugby League, which was half of that, which was $37,500. Got that, but didn't get the money from the QRL. So we...
so you're down 110 grand.
We didn't get it from Wynnum. So we were down and absolutely furious for the months and then the years that followed. And thankfully, the Brisbane Broncos got started in 1988, so it was only sort of like a 12-month wait after that we had to go through it. So
it's a great story.
Tough times.
It's a great story. So we've delved into your rugby league career, but I just want to take it back before we go to playing rugby league in Brisbane. Like, what's your first memories of rugby? Was it rugby union or rugby league either? What's your first memories as a kid?
Playing rugby league, I was the mascot for my dad's team. He was coaching. He was a former player himself. He played for West in Brisbane. He went on to coaching. He said he had bad knees and went on to coaching. So that was it.
So you're the mascot?
I was the mascot.
What was the team?
That's Winner Manly.
Right.
And he had the under 18s, and then the Colts. As they were, and then he coached C grade, reserve grade and first grade in Brisbane. But I had this love where I used to run on first and always enjoy it, which was a fair bit of fun, and to be able to do that was fantastic.
So who would you have first played football
I played for Cannon Hill. We were living on Creek Road, Cannon Hill. In those days, Dad used to say, I bought this place on a nice quiet street, Creek Road. Now it's a 6-lane motorway. And he, every afternoon, used to come home from work and I'd say to him, Dad, teach me how to do this, teach me how to do this, teach me how to do this. And he worked over at Lutwich, got home, and usually it was dark, certainly in rugby league seasons. It was dark, but he'd always spend time in the backyard teaching me how to do things, and I got the chance to be able to do that and enjoyed life. Played footy through my primary school days, and then moved to Brisbane State High School, just out the window here, and had to play a different sport. That was rugby union, where I was playing, and got to play union on Saturdays and league on Sundays.
And were you... I always badge this the same way. Most people that have had tremendous success that come on this show are very modest, as you obviously are as well. But were you a standout? Looking back, Wally, were you the kid that everyone's like, oh, we're playing against Wally Lewis this week?
There was always a couple of guys in the team. Certainly my early days at Cannon Hill, a lot of the guys, they were playing it because their parents told them they had to play it.
Yep.
And I used to say some of those kids were living out their parents' dream.
They
They
Still see that today, Wally.
Yeah, sadly. So that was the case, and it went on, and I enjoyed it. The rugby days, it kind of got serious, and I felt that my career got a little bit better when I had my time in rugby at Brisbane State High, because I learnt some new skills from a different code, which came in very handy. And one of them was a spiral pass, a spin pass, and no one in rugby league had ever seen it. In rugby, it was just a pretty regular thing. So I introduced that to the game, and pretty much 12 months later, everyone was doing it.
Wow.
It came in, and it was, you watch a game now, and every single person does it. So it's a case of just the new part of rugby league.
You went to 77 to the schoolboys, undefeated tour of Great Britain, the Invincibles, and Japan as well. So when you come home, who do you first play professional rugby league for?
For Valleys, yeah,
Valleys.
that was a wonderful tour. We weren't just as in the schoolboys tour. Japan, France, England, Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and Holland.
Undefeated.
So
what are you, 16 or something at this time?
I was 17.
It's a fair trip, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
That's a fair trip.
Especially the one to Holland.
Look at so you slid into Amsterdam in the late 70s. Heavens above, Wally.
Yeah, that was. So this is what life is all about.
Right, this is a bit different to Brisbane.
Okay, yeah, much different to Brisbane. Came home from that, and it was fantastic. I played alongside some of the most gifted footballers I've ever seen, and I often say that Mark Ella, we had the Ella brothers, three of them on that the tour, Mark, Glenn and Gary Ella, and they were able to display attack that very few people had ever seen. We played some games,
Well, you were smacking
rugby
teams.
union game. Yeah, some games though we didn't kick the only time we kicked the ball was to kick off, start the game, and kick for goal.
The rest
at
was
the
just
end.
passing.
And the coach said it's running rugby we play,
Which is the beautiful type of rugby to
it
watch.
is magnificent. He said if you kick the ball, and I believe that there's not fair reason, you won't play the next two games.
Wow.
So everyone played it, but the team that we had there, it was freakish. We had Mark Ella, who was the 5'8". The other 5'8" was Tony Melrose, who was the team captain. He had to move out to inside centre. I was the inside centre. So my spot and Michael Hawkers, who went on to play for the Wallabies for 10 years, we got shifted. Gary Ella was the outside centre, and he was never going to get moved. We had Peter McPherson, who was the Australian beach sprint champion with the most massive legs I'd ever
Big
seen.
quads, did he?
Yeah, most massive legs I'd ever seen. And Glenn Ella at fullback. And then we also had Michael O'Connor, who went on to play rugby league for New South Wales and Australia. It was the most freakish tour I think that I ever had the pleasure of enjoying. We learned just as much about life as we did about footy. It was quite remarkable.
Well, I did read a lot about it, and there was articles written when they had the reunion more recently, talking about one of, if not the greatest Australian sporting team to ever leave the country. That was beaten like 66-0 and stuff.
Yeah. I remember Mark Ella. He retired at 24.
Wow.
And I rang up and I said to him, "What are you doing? You're the most gifted player." I said, "I'm pissing in your pocket again, but you're the most gifted footballer I've ever seen." And he said, "Well, I've achieved everything I wanted to. What else is there?" He said, "I did the Grand Slam tour." He said, "We beat the All Blacks. I've achieved everything." He said, I don't really want to go to training every second night and do it." And I felt that it was a real shame for the Australian sporting public that he was a kid at 24 years of age. He just decided his life, his everyday life, and having a couple of kids guaranteed that there were other things to do.
I mentioned to you at the start that I was going to play you some clips to reminisce. It's an amazing thing, YouTube. I don't know if you spent any time on it, but so we go to the 1979 Brisbane Rugby League Grand Final, where you're playing the South Magpies.
We beat them 26-0.
You did. See, this is the thing about your recall. That's extraordinary. So you're playing for the Fortitude Valley Diehards, which is one of the great nicknames. I hadn't heard that. So you must have lost the 78 grand final, I think.
Got beaten to East on the bell.
Right, so let's just have a listen. So this is you in the sheds, pre-game, Wally.
You're sure to be singled out for extra attention. Does that worry you?
No, not really. I'm just going to have to keep getting up, that's all.
Has the loss of last year's grand final still in your mind?
Yeah, that's what I think made the team all that more determined not to lose this one, It's no use coming 2 years of football and losing 2 years grand finals, just like Parramatta and Sydney. Can't do it.
That's you. You're a handsome man with good hair. It must be said too, Wally.
I used to have long hair down to my shoulders.
What's it like to look back at this? Like this is 1979. So we're 45 years ago here.
That's quite amusing, actually, to look at it. And I can remember looking at another bit of vision a guy showed me, and we ran onto the field, and the first thing that I did was flick the hair out of the eyes.
I've seen it.
I had the four-finger comb and just moved it over. And, if there's one thing that I had in those days, I think it was a bit of confidence on board. I was playing in a wonderfully talented team. Ross Strudwick, God rest his soul, was the captain coach of that team. And the one thing that I always used to enjoy about Ross, he gave me free rein. He used to say, everyone else in this team, he said, I tell them what to do, where to go, when to do it, and how to do it. You've got free rein. You go wherever you want to do. The only thing that I insist that you do is support play. Come into that. Chris Close was also playing for us, and we both went on to play State of Origin the next year.
So you win, as you said.
26-0, actually, we won.
In front of 35,000 at Lang Park, which becomes synonymous with you. Now, I'll need to find the right part, but this is now post-game. I'm taking you to the rooms post-game. So you mentioned Ross Strudwick. So this is, when we talk about man of the match now, so you're about to hear what Ross gets here. Wally, I'd love this. For the man of the match. I don't know who this chap is who's doing the presenting.
David Wright. He played for Brothers here in Brisbane and also played for Queensland and Australia.
Okay, so have a listen in the 1979 BRL Grand Final.
No.
What you get for man of the match.
Yep.
Here we go.
I couldn't go past Ross Strudwick for the $100 Metro Ford man of the match. Ross was in everything.
$100 from Metro
$100
Ford,
yeah.
Wally.
Yeah, $100. There was. You tell people about it, and they think you're telling stories. I'm glad that you actually play that $100. It was quite remarkable, and we were insisting that he put that money on the bar a little bit later on, but so I don't think we saw it.
We do hear from you now, and we hear from you very briefly, and then you need to explain to me who the bloke is next to you who
has the best mustache in...
and he asked him a question, but his name. Okay, so this is you, post-grand final win.
While I've got the boys here, Wally Lewis, how does it feel, Wally?
Oh, it feels really good, George. And as Ross said 12 months ago, we had tears in our eyes, and we got tears in our eyes again. You know.
How about you, Squirter?
It's good to be a diehard, George.
Who the heck is Squirter?
Squirter is Peter McQuirter. He had his own menswear business here in Brisbane. He was in charge of fashion. And
how do you feel, Squirter? So he was a menswear. He's got a good moustache.
Yeah, it's a beauty, and he always used to look after that absolutely perfectly. After a game, he'd have the brush or the comb and standing in front of the mirror, just making sure the moustache was in absolutely perfect position.
I love that. So I want to take you forward. So now, I didn't understand all this, and a lot of our listeners won't. So State of Origin comes along. So prior to that, so it's 1980, and you'd played 2 matches, but it was the first 2 matches which New South Wales won was state of residency. So it was where you were living, was my understanding, as opposed to where you were originally born.
That's right.
So the first 2, you lose the first 2, but then you play what is ostensibly the first State of Origin match. Yep. And before we go into it, I want to read to you something from the paper here. Prior to the experimental match, the State of Origin concept was derided by the Sydney media. So you've played your first 2 where you're playing now. So if you're a Queenslander playing in New South Wales, you're playing for New South Wales in this match. Yeah. Whereas the third match where you're born, is my understanding, is then, so it's the first time you represent where you're born. The Daily Mirror's Ron Casey, very famous journalist, showed his opposition to this game and his bias towards Sydney as a whole when he called it a phony promotion and wrote in his newspaper column, to the Queensland hillbillies in Premier Joe's Banana Land, the State of Origin match might be a big deal. But to those in the land of the living here in Sydney, it's just another match without much meaning. So this is a nice way to start the rivalry. Banana Land. Banana
Land. And he got left with not egg on his face, but with an omelette all over his face. State of Origin. The first game that he ever played in 1980 was the beginning of the return of State of Origin, of interstate football.
And did you have... We'll get to the game in a moment.
Just to explain why. We went. They didn't even play the games, the interstate games in those days. Most of the New South Wales guys would pull out. They'd say, I might pick up an injury. I'll miss my club game this weekend. Okay. That's the way that it is. So they used to play them on a Tuesday night, I think, in those days, and beat us quite convincingly. We screamed that we needed the State of Origin match, and in 1980 it was given. And did the Sydney boys, Sydney-based players, play much for a role? Yeah, they sure did. In our forward pack, we had Arthur Beetson, John Lang, Rod Morris, Rod Reddy, Rowan Hancock, who are basically, all international players. We got them to play for Queensland.
So they're playing.
I was the lock forward.
They're playing in Sydney, but they're from Queensland.
Yep,
State
all
of
except
Origin.
Rowan Hancock. He was a Queenslander, and all the other boys were up there. And then we had a few blokes in the back line. Greg Oliphant, Alan Smith. They were Queenslanders. Then we had Chris Close and Mal Meninga. Mal was still playing in Brisbane, so it was a real. Most of the Sydney people wanted the end of interstate football. They said it's a pain in the arse. We can't be bothered playing it anymore. We thrash Queensland every year, and it used to be quite a common feature for 5 or 6 blokes to pull out and say, I've got a crook leg.
So they didn't want to miss
They didn't want to miss their Sydney club game.
Which is what was the death of State of Origin football in AFL. Yeah. Exactly. Yep. And we look at what you have and think, wow, it's amazing. And they quite openly, they got it from AFL. They studied
what they had to do to make it a bit of a success. And when it started with Game 1 in 1980, instantly Lang Park, or Suncorp Stadium now, it was absolutely jam-packed. The next year in 81, it was packed again. And then in 82, they said, well, we're enjoying what we're seeing here. Now we're playing all 3 games as State of Origin. So just hold that thought. So we go... There's some great stuff here, Wally. So Queensland win the first match 2010. And I've linked a couple of things here. So Arthur Beetson, who is also a legend in your part of the world here.
So this is the first time at age 35 he gets to play for Queensland.
Yeah.
Because he's had to... Here we go. We'll pull this up. Because he's had to play where he was playing rather than the state he was from. Here we go.
Yeah, I still remember the commentator saying, there he is, Arthur Beetson, and playing for Queensland.
Yes.
Is this the beginning of history?
And the reception for him...
Oh, they went nuts.
Now there's a sight to see. Big Artie in the maroon of Queensland and captain.
So they're just...
Yeah.
So this is a big thing that he's playing for the first time, yeah?
And watch the swinging arm that came into play. Arthur was playing for Queensland against some of his best mates, against some of his teammates.
So this becomes the first blue in State of Origin footy.
And how did it start? Bang.
Bang. Who's that chap?
Greg Oliphant, who was the halfback. He was a pretty hot-headed young man. He threw a punch, and the New South Wales player got up and returned it.
They've come from everywhere.
Arthur Beetson was standing alongside, and Arthur Beetson went bang, hit him. The headlines in the Sydney paper were about the drama of State of Origin. Arthur actually hit his best mate, who was Mick Cronin, who was playing for New South Wales. And
state versus state, mate versus mate.
Exactly right. All the media said to him, "Why did you do that?" And he said, "Because I was on the opposition. That's why." And State of Origin, certainly the drama was born on that occasion.
So let's have a look. So these... And this is why it's such a treat to chat with you, because you can tell me the history of State of Origin, which I had no idea. Well, let's have a look at the first ever try Queensland scored in State of Origin football.
4-3, Queensland lead. 2 penalties to a try. Beetson on the blind side of the ruck.
Always Arthur's offload started it, and then it was 4 quick passes across to Chris Close, who gave it to Boasted, he was the fastest bloke in footy.
He is quick, isn't he?
Oh, yeah. He sure was. He's a North Queensland boy, and he opened it up, and quite honestly, the people that lived in houses around Lang Park, as it was, or Suncorp Stadium now, said that when Queensland scored that first try in State of Origin, they could feel that the tin roofs starting to rattle. It was the exaggeration of the time, but it was something that it sent the crowd absolutely nuts.
Well,
absolutely nuts.
So this is it's a hooter in rugby league.
Yep.
This is the final moment when Queensland win.
Setting up rockets over on the grandstand side. We've had scenes of jubilation like this. Somebody could get hurt out there. The players are in very severe danger of being mobbed and molested.
There's punters cover. The players are in serious danger. Queensland 20, New South 10, the first official State of Origin. So overall, like, you're in the sheds afterwards. Is there any understanding, and what does this mean to you as Queensland players at this stage in this inaugural State of Origin?
Interstate football was born again.
Right, it was back.
It had died. The guys didn't like playing it. You had the thrill of playing for Queensland, but you didn't like to get thrashed as they did every time we played. So Origin footy was born. To have Arthur in charge, and then later, 12 months later, to have him back on board was fantastic. But I can remember Arthur said he always used to say, "No, it wasn't me that did it. It was what you young blokes learnt from playing alongside me and the experienced guys." He said, "Now you know that you're as good as what we are, what we were, and what we will be." And I think that was fantastic to have it. We had a group of guys, and I'm probably jumping forward to go, we carried that confidence through the next season. 82, we won the 3-match series, and that was fantastic. 83, we won it again, and then 84, we got to play, and I often say that was as confident a Queensland side as I've ever seen. And I dropped the line. I went to the post-match press conference with Senator Ron McAuliffe, and he was the man in charge of the Queensland Rugby League, and he got up and he made this wonderful speech to the media, everyone that was around, and one of the guys said, "It sounds like he's in Parliament again." He's just giving us this line, and he continued on, and one of the guys said, "Wally, do you mind if Ron, can we ask Wally a question? Wally, do you mind if we put it to you? And I said, oh, no, I'm waiting my turn for a question here. Ron's had about 20, and they said, okay, here we go. Okay, who would you say is most responsible for Queensland's success that they've had in State of Origin football? Would you say that it's your leadership? Would you say that it's Mal Meninga's goal kicking, always cooks really well, the dominance of the forwards? Who was the one person that's most responsible? And I went to answer the question, and Ron McAuliffe got to his feet. And he started walking backwards and forwards like he was in Parliament. And he said, you're after the one person. And the journo said, Ron, I'm after Wally. He said, no, but I can give you a better answer to that question. He said, the one person who's responsible, I've got it. It's the Lord Jesus Christ. And all of the journos went, oh no, the senator's been on the port again. And he said, is that right, smart Alec, is it? Actually, you're a smart ass. He said, that's not right at all. He said, but Colin Scott, this is our team, fullback Colin Scott, the rest of the back line, Kerry Bowstead, Gene Miles, Mal Meninga, Chris Close, Wally Lewis, Mark Murray, the forward pack, Paul Vaughton, Wally Fullerton-Smith, Brian Niebling, Greg Dowling, Greg Kinescu and Dave Brown. Every one of those blokes is born within 18 months, 2 weeks and 2 days of each other. Every one of those blokes, by the time that they've played under 18 football and going into senior grade football, they've done that at least 30 to 40 times. Every one of those blokes, by the time that they played their first representative game, have played against or alongside each other at least 60 or 70 times. And every one of those blokes, by the time that they've played tonight's game, have played against or alongside each other at least 80 to 90 times. So I think the big bloke upstairs has been pretty good to us. Wouldn't you say that, smart ass? And all the journos are scribbling it down, racing out. They wanted to get it on the radio first. They wanted to get it in the paper. And I looked at Ron and he said, what are you looking for? All the journalists are gone. And I said, yeah. I said, that's remarkable. But you're right. Colin Scott's born in 1959. Bowie's 59. Gino's 59. Mal's born in 1960. Chris Close is 59. I'm 1959. Mark Murray's 1959. Greg Dowling's 59. Greg Kinescu's 1960. Dave Brown's 1959. Mate, you're remarkable. Paul Vaughton's 1959, Brian Niebling's 1960. I said, all of the blokes, you're exactly right. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, about all the guys you said with their birthdays. And he said, I've got no idea whether it's right, but those dickhead journalists swallowed the story. And he said it was a very short press conference. And he turned and walked out. And I thought, that's the way that I'd like to be able to control the media in the future.
So we have skipped ahead, but your first State of Origin try. So it's 1981. You made captain, which I want to ask you about in a moment. Again, it's only a one-off match because the first two matches are again still state of residency. You win at 22-15, but you're 15-0 down after 15 minutes. Okay, now I got to read you this. Following the break, new Queensland Maroons captain Wally Lewis sparked a second-half revival when he stepped past Sterling and went on a long diagonal run, breaking a late attempted tackle by Ray Price to score a dazzling and much-replayed individual try. Barry Ross told the television viewers that Lewis had told him earlier in the day that he was motivated to play well after receiving criticism from the Sydney media for both his selection in the Australian team and supposedly lacklustre form in the test against France. So the New South Welshmen, they're into you, Wally. And then in true Australian sporting fashion, it sounds like you've stuck it up him. So just let me find this try here so I can show it to you. This would be a privilege for me, Wally. Let's look back on your first State of Origin try together. Here we go. I'll put on the big one.
Moving it wide, Lewis through the gap, he could score, he's going to score, yes, no double movement, fair try, and Lewis gets the...
You got the beard on and everything, you look like the wild man from Queensland, but what's it like to look back and reflect on some of this stuff and actually watch it?
It's always enjoyable rather than be watching tries where you let one in with a missed tackle. But it's good. We often used to talk about things, and I talk to younger guys about what you do to try and achieve success. And part of this one is I used to have this thing where one of the great players that played before my time used to say, I watch Lewis and he reads the play. And it's a nice saying for that I'm always sort of looking for opportunities that exist in the defensive line. And there was one of the players in that moved way forward out of the New South Wales defensive line, and it became obvious that with him moving forward so quickly, where the defenders were coming up, with him coming forward so quickly, there was going to be space to run on a curve motion, and it was something, I don't know where I got it. I think I was born with it, or my dad taught me that in the backyard the whole time, and it was just something that was there. But I do remember for the players how excited they got when we got back to the halfway line. They knew that we were back in the match, and the embarrassment of the first half had tended to disappear.
So you played 29 State of Origin matches, Wally, 28 as captain. You won 7 out of the 10 series, record 8 man of the matches. You were captain from 81 to 91. What did it mean to you? What does it mean to you to be the captain of Queensland in State of Origin, especially in its formative period where it became on the way to the juggernaut that it is now?
Yeah, no. I think I played 31 State of Origins.
I cut you short.
And it was just a real honour to get the opportunity to be able to play for Queensland was great, but the thrill was made so much greater because of the players. When I was a younger guy, when I was 20 years of age in my first game, I was playing along some of the superstars in the game, and that first forward pack again. I know I'm being repetitive here, but Beetson, John Lang, Rod Morris, Rowan Hancock, and Rod Reddy all had played for Australia. And I was just this kid from Brisbane that they said had a bit of speed. What I had was youth, probably more than anything, and I got the opportunity. I was given the chance to do it, and there are so many dormant champions out there that just don't get a go in footy, and you feel sorry for them. And I think it's just what the boss, Ron McAuliffe, had in mind, and I think he informed me that he added a little bit of weight behind the selector's decision on selecting me, and I owed him a massive thank you for that. But it was the opportunity that I needed, and from that moment, I don't think I ever looked back. But I had always some wonderful players around, and again, I go back to that part where we had a group of players that were all born around the same time, and we'd played against and alongside each other dozens and dozens of times, so we knew what it took.
When does the nickname, and it's a fair nickname, when does the nickname The King come into being? Like, if you're going to have a nickname, you hate it.
Oh, yeah, well, it was given to me.
It's a fair nickname,
in 1984, 1983, Max Krilich was the captain. I was the vice captain.
What was your old nickname?
I didn't really have one.
Okay,
Yeah,
right. Just Louis or Wal?
Didn't really have one. 1984 came along. The captain from 83 was Max Krilich. He decided to retire. He was finished. We got to the 84 series, and some of the journos said to me, how do you think you're going to be inspired by the possibility of being Australian captain? And I said, oh, mate, I'd like to leave that to the selectors. They make their mind up there. And they also asked Ray Price his thoughts, and he said, oh, well, I'd expect. And apparently he said, I think that I'll get it, my experience. And I've had a lot more experience playing for Australia, and that's the way that it is. Anyway, we went on to beat New South Wales in the Origin series, and the question came at the press conference as I was standing there waiting, and I did my presser, and it lasted about 15 minutes, and then Ray was saying, "Oh, look, I've had enough of this. I'm going. That's it." And they said, "Oh no, we'll put you in now." And one of the first questions was, "Well, Ray, it was all about the Australian captaincy. You sort of said that whoever wins should be captain. Queensland won, so who do you think should be Australian captain?" And he said, "Oh, look, give it to Lewis. Fair dinkum. Up here, he thinks he's the king anyway." And he said, "What do you want to?" And they said, "How'd you feel?" And he said, "Lousy. Don't enjoy it. Queensland's performance a good one? He said, "Oh, well, they won, didn't they?" And they were
give you much.
And it was one of those press conferences where you don't like doing them. You lost, you feel like saying, the other team were better. But Ray dropped the line about fair dinkum. He thinks he's the king anyway, and all the guys saw it. They were watching on the TV in the dressing room, and it came up, King's back. King, get us a beer, King, and we'll have one, King. Come on, we'll go from here, King. And from that time forward, every time the guys used to say, or introduce themselves or say something to me, it was King. What do you think we'll do? And we'll go and have a couple. And it got to me, and I absolutely despised it. But I made the stupid. Well, I was stupid enough to blow up every time the players call me King.
Makes it worse, Wally.
Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't smart enough to think of that. And they just kept going. And it still happens today. I work pretty much in close proximity every day with Gene Miles, straight across the road at Suncorp Stadium. And he still calls me that. He knows it pisses me off to get called King, and all the boys do it. No, King, here he is. We've run into him again. So sympathy certainly wasn't part of it.
Well, okay, so that's been called the King. Now, I got one more for you here. So Brisbane Broncos come into the competition. You play your first game against Manly at Lang Park.
44-10.
44-10. There you go. So I think you're going okay. So we talked about the King. Let's have a listen to this.
As Gene plays it. A field goal attempt from the Emperor is wide.
So at that stage, the Broncos win 44-10. Do you hear what they called you when you went your field goal attempt?
No.
The Emperor. So you've gone from the King. Now you're rolling as the Emperor. The Emperor of Lang Park.
Well, I think they had it I think it was in the newspaper the next day, and it was the Emperor Strikes Back. And I thought, oh, no. And it had about me, the criticism that I wouldn't make it playing in the Sydney competition. And I was really happy. It was a fantastic performance from the Broncos. Our coach,
Wayne
Bennett.
Wayne was the inaugural coach.
Didn't get carried away. Oh, it's all right. We won that. But don't get carried away, otherwise. And we won, I think it was 6 in a row to start the season, and then we lost a couple, and we did. We started to really discover the difference between playing in Brisbane and how tough the Sydney competition was.
In what way?
We had a whole pile of injuries, and we knew that we were going to have to perform consistently, but we kind of just ran out of a little bit of strength and a bit of character. And some of the players, particularly when it came to State of Origin, when those few players were out, the guys that were on call to play for the Broncos couldn't quite get there. And Bennett had this thing about, should I make the players unavailable for Origin? And that didn't go down too well with either the representative selectors or the players. We all wanted to play Origin footy, but the consistency needed, and I think that I learnt, and most of the other guys that were playing for the Broncos that had come from the Brisbane Rugby League comp had learned the necessity for consistent performances. Had to perform every week to the same level. And Bennett said when he went down to coach in the Sydney comp, he did that with Canberra, where Mal Meninga and a whole pile of other blokes, Gary Coyne, Peter Jackson, God rest his soul, were playing, and they said that they found it easy for the first 5 or 6 weeks, and then they realised how tough it was for the rest of the season.
Gotcha.
And that's what it was. They needed to be consistent performers.
Indulge me in one more set of highlights. So we get to the 1991 State of Origin series, which becomes your last. The first game, Queensland win it. Reading about this, it's declared one of the great State of Origin series. The first game, Queensland win a tight, low scorer, 6-4. Then New South Wales win the second one, 14-12. Okay, so this is the way Game 3 is introduced.
Lewis just strolling out, acknowledging the crowd, the Emperor of Lang Park, as they say, and this could be perhaps the last time we'll see Lewis in a Queensland jumper. There's some speculation that Wally Lewis may retire tonight if Queensland wrap up the series.
So that's the way the broadcast starts. We'll get to that retirement. Queensland, you end up winning 14-12 after trailing 12-8. The winning try to a non-rugby league person, I watched it, and the emotion around here, I'd just love you to play the winning try and get your memories on this game of football. So it's set up that it could be your last state of origin. It's 1-1, you're down late in the game.
Very hard. Yes, it was. Bobby Linden now comes out to Jackson. Jackson through one, handballs it over to Langer. They're losing ground. Now if they can get it out through Hoff. He gets it back to Meninga. Meninga standing there like a colossus. Gets away to Langer. Along, floated out for Shearer. Shearer heading for the line. Yes, Shearer's there. Unbelievable football. Can you believe this state of origin?
You got goosebumps?
Goosebumps.
So do I, mate.
All over.
So do I. You have goosebumps, yeah? The names, the Langer, the Meninga, the Lewis, the fact that the play was dead a couple of times. I've got goosebumps now. See your goosebumps. And the crowd are losing their mind. What are your memories of that, Wally?
That moment, knowing that the players had started to talk, and I'd heard a few of them screaming before the game, we've got to do it for Wally. It came up again during the game, got to do it for Wally, and I said, just do it for yourselves. If you're doing it for someone else, you're not going to be performing at your best. And to have a finish from the guys was quite remarkable. Something that, I don't know if you can start the vision again, where Mel takes the kick.
Let's do it.
It was at a space where scores were...
Oh, yes.
Scores were square, and he had to kick it to put us in front.
So before you describe the kick to me, so I'm so used to watching rugby league, and you come around like on a hook and hit it with the side of your foot, but Mal's running straight at the footy.
Yep, and most guys, 99% of the kickers prior to this time were toe pokers.
So it's a toe poke. That's what I was going to say. Yep. Okay, let's have a look at it, and then you can just describe it to me. Oh.
And just got in.
Is that Darryl Eastlake?
Yeah.
It looks okay from where I'm looking. It's like the weightlifting.
The late great Darryl Eastlake.
The great Darryl Eastlake.
Yeah. Mal came back, and here I go. I remember he came back. He was looking up. He gave the clenched fist go, and then he did that one was for you. Because I told the guys just before we were running on, I said to the trainer, Dick Tosser Turner, this is my last game. And he raised an eyebrow and he said, what? And I said, I've got a little girl to look after now. I just found out my daughter, Jamie Lee, was profoundly deaf. And families are always more important than footy. And I made the decision pretty much in our final training session. I said to Toss, I've just got to go do a family thing with Jamie Lee. She's just at the doctor's, and I was expecting to be there half an hour, and I think I was there 2.5 hours. And they had the training session, and I came back from the docks, and I wasn't in a good mood. And I said, oh, sorry, I've taken so long, mate. I said, and all the blokes were giving it to me. Oh, you're late as usual, Wally. You've never been on time in your life. And I told Tosser, and they said, oh, fellas, we'll just train for another 5 minutes. We'll go back out there for another 5 minutes. And they were going, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're finished. We're all over. And I could see that Tosser had whispered to one, who whispered to another and another. And everyone said, yeah, we'll just do another five minutes. And I got the ball passed to me twice, and I dropped it both times. And I said, I don't think this is a good idea. Let's just wrap it up. And every one of the players came to my room in the build-up for the game the next day, and they just said, mate, I said, I've decided I'm going to retire from this game. That's it. I said, I got a little girl to look after. And Mal came in. I think he was probably the second last, and then Tosser Turner, the manager, came in again at the end, and he said, mate, they're going to win it. The boys have said that they won't lose this one. And when Mal did that kick and he was coming back, he did that's for you. And I can't sort of describe how much it meant. And if I had some other support, it was the fans. It was fantastic, and I got the chance at the end of the game to accept the shield. And I said to the public, I think my last words were, I got a little girl to look after now.
I'll play that in a sec because it's a great story, and it's great to see you reflect back on Mal and he's pumping his fist. It says, so I didn't know whether this was urban myth or not, but it says 10 minutes before the end of the game, this was the match report, 10 minutes before the end of the game, the Lang Park crowd announcer advised the 33,226 strong crowd that Wally Lewis was playing his last game for Queensland. Lewis had decided to retire from Origin football after receiving news on the day of the game that his daughter Jamie Lee was deaf, with only his family and the Queensland team knowing about his decision. Queensland manager Dick Tosser Turner later admitted that Lewis had given an instruction and plotted the perfect timing for the announcement to be made. True story, not true story?
Yeah, he said, do you want this to be made public? And I said, no, not really. I said, I'm having enough trouble dealing with it. And he said, he said, you sure? And I thought about it for a while, and I said, actually, Tosser, I said, if we're behind, if we need it, yeah, get the crowd, let them know. And I didn't hear it. But apparently it did, and they all went nuts, the crowd. They gave us some wonderful support, and they got us home. They did that pretty often at Lang Park, as it was known, but it was something, and I got the chance at the end of the game to say thank you to them.
Let's have a listen.
Right throughout the world, some amazing efforts, superhuman efforts. Wally Lewis probably bidding his last farewell in that maroon jumper.
Wally Lewis, another 2 points. I mean, you cannot split these teams. 2 points the first game, the second game, the third one. Magnificent.
Yeah, that's right, mate. We won the game, but I think congratulations has got to go to both teams. That was a magnificent game of football. You know, there weren't many goal kicks in it, but I don't think anybody can hope to see a better game.
Is it your last one?
Yeah, that's it, mate. I've got a little girl to look after now. I love it very much.
Go and enjoy it, mate.
It's a fairy tale finish, that, isn't it? I can see you're emotional about it, looking back on it.
Yeah, all parents at some stage in their lives, they get some bad news most of the time, and it was something that I didn't take too kindly at the time, but she's gone on. I'm very proud of my beautiful daughter, Jamie Lee.
Represented all sorts of...
Yeah, she's played for Australia in water polo, which is remarkable. She's the first deaf person to do so in a hearing sport.
Yeah.
And that's it. She's grown up. She's in her mid-30s now. Oh, boy, doesn't that make me sound even older.
You old bastard,
She's, yes, in her mid-30s now, and she's had the chance to... She's represented Australia in water polo and been over and just missed out on the Olympics, where we had a coach basically said to us, unfortunately, deaf people don't fit in all that well into hearing person sports, but she's been a thrill. But to the crowd on that night, that was, I often used to say, they're a 14th player when you're in a situation like that, and we needed support that night, and we got it.
It's a beautifully told story. It's it's a privilege to sit here and watch some of those things back with you and see the smile or emotion it puts on your face. You step away from football eventually. We could talk a lot more about football, but you become a television star as well, amazing with Channel 9 and reading the sport for all those years. I didn't know that you were dealing with epilepsy till I read about it throughout your career. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I had it. I kept it quiet. I basically was determined not to make it public information.
So who knew?
I was having just my family,
Right.
and I told Gene Miles, who was the close mate that
Yep.
I used to play with at club footy, Queensland and Australia, and it was something that I don't think I understood too much about it. There were times where I'd just be in the everyday life, and I'd be sitting there and I'd feel this strange feeling come over me. And
What type of feeling?
well, I'm about to point that out.
Okay.
Where I said to the doctor, "You're gonna laugh at me when how I describe it." I said, "You get the tingles go through you. You get this, and you know that it's coming on." I said, "It sort of comes in and goes through you, a bit like an orgasm."
Right.
But you don't go down Pleasure Street at the end.
Right.
And,
That's the only good part.
and he was laughing. And I said, see that's why
Yep.
I don't know how to really describe it to you, because you're laughing at me. I've made a dickhead of myself. And he laughed and he said, no. He said, well, what I'm laughing at is, said, quite a few people have said it's like the start of an orgasm. You get there. And I said, exactly. That's what I'm saying. He said, that's the way that it is. And you said it, and I said, yeah, you don't go down Pleasure Street, you go somewhere else. And I kept dealing with that year after year after year.
While you're playing?
Yep. Yeah, had it. And I said to my best mate then was Gene Miles, very close in the footy ranks. And I said to Gino, mate, I don't want to tell anyone, but I know that I've got her just in case I have a seizure and people are saying, what the hell's going on here? So, but don't tell anyone. I can't afford to. I said it might cost me my job.
Yes.
It might cost me the position here playing at footy. And anyway, we were out having a drink one night prior to a rep game, and I was looking at one of the guys who just kept turning around. He was talking to Gene, and he kept saying, okay, do you want a drink? Well, come and have a drink with us. And I said, I'll come over in a minute. And I walked over, and then he went, hey, Wal, do you...
Oh.
And started to mimic having a seizure. And I looked at him and he said, oh, you think you'll be all right? And I turned around to Gino, and he was sort of sticking the glass in his mouth, and realising that this guy had passed it on. And I said, I told you, no one. And he said, oh, mate, well, he might be able to help you just in case I'm not here, because I'm going to go, and, he might be able to help. And it kind of, well, it didn't snowball, but a few others found out, and I did not feel comfortable about it. It was something that I felt was just information from my family and the doc. And I dealt with it, continued on, and then got to the stage where I was working and reading the news.
On Channel 9.
In 2007,
Yep.
I think it was. And, Channel 9. And I used to get so nervous before every time I'd go on. I think, am I going to have one tonight? Am I going to have one?
So that would hang over you before every bulletin?
Yep.
Jesus.
Yep, every time.
It's a fair to front up every day.
Yeah, it wasn't something that I used to look forward to. And I used to say to the boss, people don't like listening to me. I said, I can do a story outside, where I'd cut a story up and...
Pre-recorded.
If
anything goes wrong,
no pressure on.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, I was sitting on there, and I had Bruce Page, the wonderful Bruce Page. He was always on there, and he used to make me feel, and Heather Ford, they used to make me feel quite comfortable. But I still had that concern. Am I going to have it? Am I going to have it? And virtually it didn't affect me for quite some time, well, many years. And then one night I had one virtually just as I was going down to read the news, and I thought, oh no, I can't do this. And I got there and I said, I don't think I'm not handling it all that well. And the boss said, why, what's wrong? And I said, I got there and did it, and I thought, oh, that's okay. Maybe if I have this determination to get through it. And then the next night, I was sitting there, and just as the story previous to mine went on, and the vision for that was coming up, I started to feel it. And I thought, oh, no, I'm going to have one. And Jesus. He threw to me, I can't remember what he said, but I felt the seizure coming on, and I started to wobble and think and tried to talk, and I could not get the words out. The words were backwards, sideways, upside down, not pronounced correctly, and all of a sudden I could hear in the earpiece there was a little screaming going on. And that was apparently the man in charge upstairs. He was staying in the director's room. Pagey, take over. And I was still trying to talk. And the boss had gone home and gone to some function that he was speaking at. And Pagey said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Oh, no, mate, I'd prefer not to tell you, actually. I will, but..." And then 3 days later, I had another one. And he just said, "What the hell is going on?" And I said, "Mate, I've got epilepsy. I'm dealing with this. It's not something that I've enjoyed." And then I had to go and front the boss, and was given wonderful support. That was good. And from there, it was a situation where I went back to Melbourne. Felt very comfortable going to Melbourne all the time, where I felt extremely comfortable with the way things went. I got to meet a guy down there, Professor Sam Berkovic, who's the man in charge of the Austin Hospital, epilepsy. And then I, after that, was introduced to Professor Gavin Fabini, who was the surgeon that did the surgery on me.
Which is what? What's the surgery?
They cut part of my brain out. It was a situation where I knew that I was sort of not headed for probably the future or the present that I wanted. Yep. I was just panicking, and I used to be embarrassed all of the time that I'm going to have a seizure somewhere, sometime, where people get to see the real me. And I told just a couple of my mates, Gene Miles.
So Wally's just showing me his phone. So there's, how many stitches are there, Wally? Like, it's basically a question.
They're the big staples.
Yeah, so it's a question, like a question mark shape from your forehead leading back into your head and then cutting down next to your ear. Shit. So they take part of your brain out.
Yep. Yeah, and they that was the thing that they'd make the decision on that following the tests. I had some tests, and it was a case of me laying in the bed basically for days, day after day after day, and it really couldn't be monitored until I had a seizure. So the intentions were for me to not get much sleep at all, which would almost guarantee that I was going to have a seizure.
Bring a seizure on.
Oh, and I had it. I pissed my pants, and remembered having it. And then the surgeon, Gavin Fabini, worked in with the advice that he had with Sam Berkovic, and they decided. He came in and he said, "We're going to have the brain surgery." He said, "We'll be removing something that's about the size of your thumbnail." He said, might be a little bit bigger." Oh. When it actually took place, they had some further scans which came into place in the following days, and he cut it. It was about 4.5 centimetres long by 2 by 2, the part that they cut out. And my question was always going to be, am I going to be the full quid?
Yes.
It was made, and so good was the surgery. That was in 2007 where I had it. I went down in November 2006 where it all took place. But in 2007, I had the surgery. The part was removed. Until this day, I haven't had a single seizure.
Are you serious?
So it's quite remarkable.
It's amazing medical technology.
Yeah, they are. The doctors, our doctors in this country are wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And I still send messages to Sam and Gavin. I don't know whether they get them all, but every Christmas time, I'll send them. I've forgotten a few, but it's I'm enjoying my life again now. I don't fear that I'm going to have a seizure, and it kind of has started a different part of my life where I'm getting messages from people that are saying to me, what should I do?
Well,
my child has got epilepsy. What should they do? Where should they go? And I keep telling them, I can't tell you what to do, but I'll put you in an area where you can be in conversation with these people. Start here, and if you get the chance, I'd love you to go to Melbourne. They're wonderful down there.
Well, that's what I want to ask you about, because you went on the television and spoke about your experiences, yeah? Well, I don't know whether it was on the news but you spoke about it and it became very public. So what was the reception from the public? Because it obviously happened...
Wonderful.
...in a very public place originally.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It was. I felt very guilty, very nervous, and wondered, am I going to be treated like a moron? Are people going to be full of laughter? But there might have been one or two, but everyone else was enormously supportive. They were fantastic and wished me all the best. Said, hope everything goes well. Hope, it's good for the family, and they're not going to be too upset. But they were terrific. My family. Gave me wonderful support, and it was pretty much like 9 months at home. I was told, I told my boss, I'm going to be off for about 3 or 4 months, and he said, if you turn up to work, I'll sack you. Go away, we'll tell you when to come back. So that was the 9-monther. Lee Anderson was the boss's name at 9, and I got the chance then to go back slowly into television work.
And did I have that anxiety again sitting back on the desk?
Yeah, I went...
Like first night's going to be tough.
When I had my first read,
yeah,
I shit myself.
Right.
I was shaking, and again, I had Bruce Page there who just put the hand on my leg and just said, mate, that's all right. Said, I've seen you more nervous on a football field. And I took that very well.
I loved the 48 hours before chatting with you, because I spent so much time, as I said, reading about State of Origin, but to get to hear your stories, and that story about Melbourne Inga really touched me, and to look back on that, you've been so generous with your time, and it's been a massive privilege for me to chat with you and see how well you're going at life, and your recollection of some of these amazing moments in Australian sport. For someone that's had tremendous success in their field, not just in football but in broadcasting as well, we always finish the podcast the same way, that we are lucky on this show to have all sorts of people listening all around the world nowadays, which blows my mind. A lot of young people listen that want to achieve success in their field, and it may be in sport, or it may be in science, or it may be in the field of epilepsy research. I don't know what it may be. Yeah. But what advice would you give to those people that are listening that want to achieve some success in their life based on your experiences?
Set yourself a goal. Don't make it impossible to achieve. Set it at the halfway mark and work away from that until you're quite pleased with what you've been able to achieve along the way. Other things may be on the sporting field where they want to be able to do that, and people will say that's different. Well, it's not really. You're still setting yourself a goal. You're still trying to achieve that. If it's don't miss more than 2 tackles in the next game that I'm playing, those are all pretty easy and quite acceptable to have on board. But I think at the end of the day, you get the intention to work away at whatever you're trying to achieve in the best way possible. If you're not able to achieve it, seek assistance. Ask for help. It's not that hard. And I was too arrogant and too much of a big time to want to instantly get over it. But I think I feel quite good. I've been in the very proud stakes for a long time, and I think if there's one where I was asked to name my proudest moment, was it when I was captain of Australia. I used to say no. It's every time that I'm asked to give someone help. If it's with epilepsy, I'm only too happy to do that, and I'm an expert in that subject. If it's CTE, well, I'm going to feel damn glad about that. I don't know everything about it, but to be honest, neither do the doctors. And that makes any information that we can provide for them so valuable.
I can't thank you enough for someone that I haven't met before to be so open, so honest. It's a stunning podcast. People will love the sport component, but they will also love the vulnerability in what you've discussed about CTE. Thanks for joining me on the Howie Games, mate. You've blown my socks off. I really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure, mate.
Well done. Beautifully done, Wally.